All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back with the Rider Review presented by 13K Productions. And on today's episode, Tyson and I have a very special guest for you, the president of the Riders Alumni Association, Quinn Magnuson. Quinn, how are you today?
Doing great, guys. It's a beautiful day here in Saskatoon, and it's even better that the Riders won last night.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I guess we should just get started here. We'll just go back and forth here. We'll ask you some questions. So you played in Ottawa, Montreal, Saskatchewan, and Winnipeg here. What are the differences, playing in those cities, just as a whole? What did you take out of that?
Well, I mean, that was a long time ago, back in the 1900s, as I like to say. So it's these cities all have changed probably quite a bit. I'll speak to them in order. Winnipeg has always been a great fan base. I got drafted by them in '93 and spent all of '93 and the start of the '94 season with them. Loved Winnipeg, loved the fans. Back then, the Jets were there. Now, obviously, the Jets came back, but it was really great city to be in, and everywhere we went, we got treated like royalty. '94 in Saskatchewan and Regina, the team was okay, not great. It was struggling financially, a little bit tougher to play in that environment. I mean, obviously, Rider fans are diehards, so they're always going to come out to the games, but a little more of a struggle during that time. You also have to remember, guys, like this is right during the time of U.S. expansion. So in 1993, the league decided to expand to Sacramento in '93, and then obviously to 4, 5, 6 other cities over the course of the next 2 to 3 years. So the league itself was already struggling. It was just looking for cash injections from investors, and let's throw an American team in Shreveport, Louisiana. And so that didn't really help the league much. Certainly didn't help salaries that much. I mean, my first year in the league, I made $28,000, and even when I left the league, I was only making $40,000. So kind of a rough stretch for the entire league. Ottawa was the next, I guess you could say, interesting. I want to use a word, blank show, but interesting, situation to be in, because they had already had struggles with the Gleibermans as owners, and I got there in '95. And ultimately, in the end, I'll keep the story short, the team folded at the end of the year. We were like banging on the doors to get our paychecks. That's how bad it was back then. So off season of '95 to '96, because they had folded, all the players in Ottawa were now free agents. And so they had a dispersal draft amongst the remaining CFL teams. But at this time, Baltimore had just won the Grey Cup in '95, moved to Montreal in '96, and they weren't allowed to keep 100% Americans, right? So once you moved to Montreal, they had to dump a bunch of, and some all-stars in some case, and fill the spots with Canadians. And I ended up getting drafted. I mean, I got picked up at the dispersal draft by Montreal. Jim Popp was the general manager out there. I'm sure you're familiar with that name. And he just gave me a call, and he said, "Hey, Quinn, we said we really want you to come in and do all the long snapping for us and be a reserve lineman." I'm like, awesome, great. Montreal is a great city to live in, but at the time, because I mean, obviously the Canadians run the roost there. When the Alouettes returned, people were like, "What? The Alouettes? They came back?" So that was a little tougher, even though we went 13-5, made it to the East Final, and ultimately lost to Doug Flutie 2 years in a row. Actually, Doug Flutie, they won the Grey Cup in '95, '96, 96, '97. So all in all, I mean, like, I'd still say that Winnipeg, Saskatchewan, Edmonton are probably still the strongest markets in terms of fan base. Hamilton, Toronto, I mean, Hamilton's doing their best, and they'll always be sort of a Rider type of fan base, very loyal, but ebbs and flows. The league right now is struggling as a whole, I think, though. I think COVID really didn't help, and now a lot of teams are trying to get back on their feet. So short question, long-winded answer, my apologies, but you know what? When you play with 4 out of the 9 cities in your career, you tend to see a lot of the league, and you see kind of what's going well and what isn't. So,
fair enough. Tyson, you got anything?
Yeah, no, that's great, Quinn. That's I remember those days, not all quite that far back, but I remember the American expansion and all that, and the cool new logos and all the helmets and the empty stadiums down there and all that jazz. But
Yeah.
Yeah. So going back to your days as a player, Quinn, can you name just off the top of your head, a few of the locker room leaders that you had and the mentors you
Yeah.
had, and 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 then maybe comment on your perception of our locker room and its leadership this year, if you don't mind.
Yeah, for sure. Great question. What I found with the CFL is that, and maybe I'm speaking like the old guy, right? Like the old veteran, grizzled veteran. But what I seem to be seeing in the locker rooms these days is that you don't have as many of those 10 and 12-year veterans. You don't
Mm-hmm.
have guys that stay with the team like back when I played. So, for example, when I got to Winnipeg, the team was just laden with veteran talent. So the offensive line was Miles Gurrell, Chris Walby, Dave Black, Bob Molly. Like, wow, like that's a legendary locker room right there just for those 4 linemen. Bob Cameron, Troy Westwood, Matt Dunnigan, Greg Battle. So that team I got on was probably couldn't have been more of a perfect fit for me as a rookie going in, having that type of leadership and veteran leadership. And when I got to Saskatchewan, you had your Jurisons, your Elgards, Glenn Suter, Tom Burgess. And so I say those names, and even guys as young as you guys are still recognize those names, right?
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't know if that is maintaining itself though, right? Like I would suggest that probably in the early 2000s is when that legendary status of guys who stayed in the league 10, 15, 20 years, some of them like Bisaglia and Paul McCallum, that just doesn't seem to happen anymore because the league is now, when you do have really good players, those players are looking to jump to the NFL. And when you have really good players, free agency takes them away to other cities. And so you never really get that longevity of veteran leadership in any of the locker rooms right now. And even though I've followed the league, a lot in the 2010s, and then I did the radio show with Ray and so forth, like I'm looking across the league, looking for the Walbys and the Gurrells and the Bob Camerons and the Dunnigans and things like that. And you just don't see it as much. So, I mean, I've already mentioned the names that were around when I was playing, and I think that maintained itself through early 2000, and then now it's just kind of guys who are jumping around the league. Like right now, you guys are obviously big fans. If I said name 15 players that have been with their team for longer than 7 years, with
Mm-hmm.
one team, you probably be struggling to do that. So that's the state of the league right now, but that's not the league's biggest problem. I think obviously it's still putting bums in the seats, and there's far too many teams that aren't doing that, especially out east.
Yeah, I think the league has been struggling with that for a while now, right? And the one thing I can like I don't remember a lot of this stuff, mainly because I wasn't even alive yet back in the 90s, right? I'm a 2004 kid. Like I'm younger than a lot of people realize. And pretty much the only thing that actually sticks out in my mind from back in those days is basically, the "Oh Canada" to the tune of "Oh Christmas Tree," and
Yeah.
like that's just that it's a little bit sad that that there's not a lot of coverage of the CFL. And I think once the CFL, with this whole new CFL Plus, I think that could help. I think that's going to help the CFL a lot, with deciding where they want to send their TV crews to, right? And yeah, building off what Tyson asked you, you're a Saskatoon kid, right? And
Yep.
I think what most people can say, Saskatchewan football fans, their dream is to grow up and play, even a game in a Riders uniform. What was that like, living out pretty much every Saskatchewan kid's dream?
Well, it's funny, guys, because so let me start a little bit sooner. So in my final year at Washington State University in college, in my draft year, I was hearing rumblings from my agent about being a first round pick. The fact that I played at a Power 5 Division I school, obviously had long snapping abilities, and so it was second round at the latest. And Saskatchewan, had shown interest. Obviously, they'd made a couple calls to my agent and such. So when draft day came around, though, apparently apparently my my injury report scared a few teams, and which is sort of silly because in the CFL you don't have to keep a rookie if you don't want to. But anyways, my stock dropped. I ended up going to Winnipeg in the 6th round. Even though at the CFL Combine that year I tested top 3 in every single category, every single event, but still ended up dropping to the 6th round, which really didn't matter to me. And in terms of salary, it didn't make that big a difference between 28,000 and probably 35,000. But I ended up in Winnipeg, and I was really disappointed that Saskatchewan didn't take a flyer on me, even if they wanted to drop me late to round 4, round 5. I was really kind of choked, not going to lie, that the Riders didn't take me at some point. So I ended up in Winnipeg for that first year. Now, I did come back to Saskatchewan, and it's an interesting story how that happened. After Winnipeg released me in training camp in '94, I ended up going down to Las Vegas and playing arena football for about 6 weeks because you just want to keep playing somewhere. So Tom Porras, who was our quarterback in Winnipeg, and I both got cut. He's like, hey, Mags, let's go down to Vegas and play arena football. And he goes, I have a job already down there. I'm like, sure. So went down, played 6 weeks of arena football. But at the same time, the CFL season was happening, and the Riders happened to be in Vegas playing the Las Vegas Posse at UNLV Stadium out in the middle of the desert in 45-degree heat. And I went to the game, and after the game went down into the field and chatted with the coach, Coach Ray Yawk at the time, and said, hey, Coach, I said, I'm in Vegas playing arena football. I'd love to get back, into the CFL. He said, oh, he goes, good to know that, Quinn. He goes, yeah, we'll keep an eye out. And then a few weeks later, they picked me up because Wayne Drinkwalter, their long snapper, broke his leg. And so they picked me up for the remainder of the 94 season. So it's funny how those things happen. But, I think playing for the Riders as a Saskatchewan kid, you're right, is kind of every kid's dream. But I think every kid just dreams of, playing at the next level first, the highest level of college ball you can play. And then ultimately, if you get that shot at the CFL, I don't think it really matters where you go. The fact that you can say I played in the CFL, I got drafted and dressed for even a few games is still pretty awesome for any young Saskatchewan boy to do. And there's a ton of them around the league. And Saskatchewan still probably produces the best football players per capita in the nation. You see that with our amateur programs. But it was, just playing CFL was awesome. The lifestyle is pretty chill. Like I talked to a lot of guys in the league that were NFL guys formerly. And the NFL is a grind. It's a job. You're at the facility 20 hours a day. Like you basically are, and if you don't do your job, you're cut. You're gone. CFL is a little more relaxed. It's still intense. There's still lots of expectations, but not quite the same way. And so my 4.5 years in the CFL were a lot of fun. Made a lot of good friends that I'm still friends with today, almost 30 years later. But playing for the Riders for that short amount of time that I was there was fun. But I hate to disappoint Rider fans by saying it wasn't a lifelong dream of mine. I think every kid, it's just their lifelong dream to play professional, no matter where that is. It's a chance to say, I got paid to play a game. But yeah, it adds a little bit of shine to it for sure if you say you got to play for the hometown team.
Tyson, you said you had some questions about the American.
Yeah, that's a fascinating story, Quinn. That's dope, man. Like playing arena ball and then just going down and shaking hands with Ray Yawk. Did he have the limp back then? Remember, he had the cane limp.
Yeah, well, yeah. It's funny because back in that year, it seemed like every coach in the league was old and limping. Like Cal Murphy broke his leg and Ray Yawk was limping, and then I played for Jim Gilstrap out in Ottawa, who was in his 70s, and it's like just a recycled list of coaches in the 90s for CFL, and then they finally started to break that open. But yeah, it was just it's a cool story, man.
That's crazy. So yeah, I did do a little research. So you mentioned Washington State University a few times. That's where you were recruited and went to play Div 1. Did you cross paths with Drew Bledsoe?
Well, he had his hands on my ass every day in practice, so I guess I crossed paths with him.
Oh, you did, right? So he was a senior year?
Yeah, so I was there 89, 90, 91, 92, left in spring of 93. Drew got there in 1990. He basically, when I say graduated, I mean left the program. So he left the program as a third-year true junior. I left the program as a fourth-year true senior. And then we had a bunch of other guys. That was it. Like, we ended up going to a bowl game. Drew was All-American, #1 pick in the NFL draft. We had 3 other guys go in that draft. Myself and another teammate of mine went in the CFL draft. So playing with Drew, let me give you a little story about the first day he showed up. So he shows up to the first day of fall camp in 1990. 91. And #1, he's 6'5", 230 pounds. So for a quarterback, and he was the last of the pure, like, pocket passer, like statuesque, stand in the pocket like a Brady. But man, I still to this day have never seen a guy with a stronger arm. So our receivers are taking passes. It's just pre-practice, and they're like, "Put something on it, Drew." And the receiver, it went through his hands, broke his nose. And then another receiver later in that week in practice, it broke his finger, snapped it right back. Like, this kid had a freaking cannon on him. I saw him from his knees from the goal line throw 70 yards.
Oh my God.
And that was, it was incredible. But the great thing about Drew was he actually also had some touch. So being able to say that I played and practiced with Drew Bledsoe for even just the 3 years that he was there was quite a treat. Obviously went on to, 2 Super Bowls, wins one of them. Well, he was the backup for that one, but and I feel bad that Drew's career ended up the way it did, but still, legend at Washington State for sure. And really, when you think about it, a bit of a legend in the NFL too. You don't last 13 years in the NFL without doing something right. So yeah,
no doubt.
Yeah. So, speaking of great quarterbacks, not to say that he's there yet. The Riders have a pretty good quarterback in Trevor Harris this season. And it seems like he's really, taken over this team. What are your thoughts on his quarterback play so far this season?
I was watching the first game of the year, and I heard them say a stat like he had best completion percentage in the league, or a really good career completion percentage. I'm like, okay, good, that's what we need. We don't need someone who's going to be running all over the field trying to make passes that they shouldn't make. So I'm impressed with Harris's composure. He doesn't seem to get too flustered. The thing that I worried about most with Harris coming in, and this is and once again, it's a bit conjecture and maybe hearsay, but I heard from players that had played with him in the past that he's not a great locker room guy, and one of the reasons why he bounced around a little bit is that he has a tendency to be, it's a little bit about Trevor, and then his teammates get a little frustrated with that. Now, having said that, maybe he learned from that, because all I've seen from him this year, when I've met him, when I've heard him in the media, what I've seen on the field, is that he has kind of turned that corner, and I think he's become a better leader. I think this team. I still don't think Cody Fajardo was a bad quarterback. I still like Cody Fajardo a lot, and I think he took a lot of the blame for last year when it really was the offensive line that was the problem. But having said that, Cody's going to do well out east. But I think Trevor is a good quarterback. But once again, in this league, you can't get hurt, right? Mm-hmm. And I know he's been in the league. What is this? His 7th year? It's got to be his 7th year. And he's not very mobile. Like, we'll see how long that lasts, and hopefully he doesn't get banged up too much. But he's been doing well. The stats from last night don't show it, but man, Jamal Morrow just looked fantastic. The O-line looked really good. Really impressed with that. Happy to see the O-line playing better, because to me that's the start and finish to every team's success in this league is a good starting quarterback and your O-line. So Morrow took the load last night, 133 yards, which is great. Trevor did what he did to manage the game and allow Morrow to do his job. And so 400 yards in total offense, no matter how you slice it, run, pass, run, is still great, right? Defense, still some things to clean up. But happy with Trevor's performance so far. It's still too early to tell, though.
Tyson?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm like Caden and I have discussed on prior podcasts, like, we're both over the moon to have him here. He's shown nothing but leadership, and it just looks like we got our guy. Now, we talked a little bit off the air here, Quinn, Caden and I did, about Brett Lowther, and we're kind of tallying it up, and it seems as though he's missed 6 kicks this year, including preseason. What are your thoughts on that? And I guess, what are your thoughts on if someone is struggling like that, kicker in this instance, and the Riders do bring in some competition? What does that do for the person that's being challenged in your experience?
Well, it's never fun when you're the starter and all of a sudden you realize that you're on the hot seat and now they're bringing in competition to potentially replace you. And I mean, every coach is a little different. Like Coach Dickinson could bring in a Soley who was in camp and have him practice with the team for a few weeks and just to put a little pressure on Brett, but not necessarily have the intent of benching him. Now, having said that, this is the most I've ever seen Brett Lowther struggle. I actually talked with him about a month and a half ago. I was at an event that he was at, and I told him, I said, you're money. Like he's been absolute money for this team for a few years now. Now he's struggling. That's something that he's going to fix. I don't suspect that Lowther's going to have an entire year like this. He's got to turn a corner somewhere, though. So, bringing back, and maybe Soley's already in the practice roster. I'm not even sure at this point, but bringing back someone like that never hurts. It's a bit of a nudge, wink, wink to Lowther, saying, you know what, like, we love you, we're going to keep you here, but you have 2 more games like this, and we got to start looking at someone else. That's part of the game, though. It's part of the business. It's just the way it is. And unfortunately, as a kicker, and I even know this as a long snapper, you miss a couple snaps and you're on the waiver wire and you're gone. And that happened to me 2 years out of the 5 that I played. And the same thing happens with kickers too. And I find even in this league, kickers tend to rotate through fairly quickly, especially on other teams. But I trust Brett. I know we obviously as fans know that he's better than this. It's a mental block. It's like a golfer. It's trusting your swing. It's trusting, your practice. He said to me that night that I chatted with him, he said, people don't know how and understand how hard it is to kick at Mosaic Stadium. He said, even though you have the high-pitched sides on the stadium and the overhangs, he said that wind just whips through there like nobody's business. And he goes, it's pushing left to right at the kick, but then it's pushing right to left at the goalposts. So he said it's probably 20 to 30% harder to kick in Saskatchewan and Winnipeg for that matter than it is in Edmonton, Calgary, certainly in the domed stadiums, in this league. So it's a much tougher job to be the Riders kicker than anything else in this league in terms of kicking. So I trust Brett's gonna turn the corner. I don't have any worries about him.
Yeah, and not only, right, it's tough to stay on a roster, not only if you're making mistakes, but also if you're getting injured. And last night we saw a few injuries. We saw a few players go down, and it's hard to watch, especially when my father actually had an experience like with his Achilles being torn, and watching Malik Henry getting carted off the field last night, it was a tough watch. What are your thoughts on just how difficult is it to just stay on the field and stay healthy as a pro football player?
So I'm thinking you did your research and realized how many injuries I had. So I just to kind of give you a glimpse, since 1988, I've had 13 surgeries. And 9 of the 12 were orthopedic, so football related. So I've had 5 shoulder surgeries, an ACL reconstruct, both my hips replaced, my lower back fused. Yeah, and now it's funny you mentioned the Achilles because I have micro tears in my Achilles that I'm just nursing and handling very gently right now. So I'm a bit of an anomaly. Maybe I just got hurt more than everybody else. But I will say this much, and here's a great story going back to training camp in '94 with the Bombers, or even in '93 actually with the Bombers when I first started there. I was bitching about my back or something, hurting in the first week of double days in Brandon. And Dave Van Conant, who was our starting center at the time, says to me, he goes, Mags, do not talk to the trainer. Do not go. Just grab a bag of ice and get the heck out of the training room. Do not stay in the training room. And I'm like, but I'm hurt. I should get treatment. He goes, deal with it yourself. Because he goes, the second they think you're hurt, they'll cut you. So that's you gotta remember, like we're not dealing with NFL salary cap type money here. Like we're dealing with, I don't know what the CFL salary cap is, like 2 point something. They can't afford to keep a player around, especially veteran players that could get hurt. Now they're on the hook for that salary. So as a player in this league, and to be honest, guys, I mean, I think anybody who's played football at even the college level knows that you don't make the club in the tub, as they would say. And it's the mentality of having a higher pain threshold, playing through pain, dealing with it until the point where it's like, okay, am I hurt or am I injured? And I dealt with a lot of that. So I played, a bunch of seasons with with different teams, as you saw at the CFL, with a lower back that had a ruptured disc. I played with torn labrums and rotator cuffs, weeks on end, and got shot up or took some pills. I'm not trying to paint an ugly picture here, but that was kind of football in all the way up to the 90s. A little bit into the 2000s. Obviously, guys still have a high pain threshold. They play through pain. My son's at University of Arizona right now, and he's playing through pain because he goes, as soon as they think you're hurt, you drop to the bottom of the depth chart and they forget about you. So this profession is not easy on the body. That goes without saying. Everybody knows that. Some people are affected more by it, like myself with 13 surgeries. Other people can, Miles Garrell said, he goes, I played 17 years, Quinn. He goes, I never had so much as a torn hamstring. I'm like, well, good for you. I'm happy for you, but that's not the norm. The norm is to play with pain, to play with tears, to play with, whatever. Now, obviously, an Achilles tear you can't come back from that. That requires surgery and such. But it's the thing that I do like about it, though, guys, is that even though that profession beats you up, and you're certainly not getting paid a lot of money for that, at least not in the CFL, is it teaches endurance, it teaches discipline, it teaches raising that pain threshold. I think you're stronger for it. I mean, I think everybody gets stronger from a little bit of pain. But yeah, there's so many players out there that, you watch the game and you see them play at a high performing level. And then you find out after the game, the one guy had a separated shoulder and they popped it back in. Or he had his finger snapped back. They popped it back in. He had a slight tear in his ACL and I played an entire season in Ottawa with a torn ACL. Because if you can still play, you play. And the teams and the coaches would rather have their star player at 80% than the backup, let's say, at 100. And those are the tough decisions that coaches and players and training staffs have to make. Now, it's way better now. Teams are much more in tune with their players. The training staff are way better. Rehabilitation and prehabilitation is way better. So it's, like I said, for my son, who will be draft eligible into the CFL next year, he's already told me how much different it was from when I played. And I like that. I like the fact they're not just beating players into the ground and running them in 100-degree heat till they drop, things like that. It's better these days, but yeah, it's just part of the game.
Tyson?
Yeah, no, I speaking of injuries and O-line, and you know both of those quite well, Quinn. What do you make of our O-line this year, the changes that were made? And I don't know if you can maybe comment on the poor guy, Gerald Hawkins. I saw him get carted off. His career might be over, and he just came back. It's awful.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw they had the two new starting tackles last night. Inside obviously is pretty set, but the two new starting tackles, Kelly and Hawkins. Yeah, man, it's tough to see. It's tough to see anybody go down, even if they miss 3 games. You don't want to see that, obviously, but if it's something longer than that, it really is dejecting. I thought Kelly played really well last night. Having to bring in Bandy and throw him in at guard and then moving Furland out to tackle was a bit of a stretch for Logan. It's certainly, and here's the thing. Tackle is the hardest position to play on the offensive line, if not maybe on the offense, aside from quarterback. But he did well. There was a couple times where his drop steps weren't, quite what a tackle should be doing, but that's because he's used to playing inside a guard his entire career, right? So Furland did well enough, considering it was his first game at tackle. I really like Kelly. Bandy is much better suited to play guard than at center. I wasn't a fan of him at center last year, but maybe that was a fish out of water. But the O-line and the schemes that I saw in terms of the blocking schemes last night was better. They seem to be firing off the ball. Now, when you have a running back that's having a hot night and the offensive coordinator keeps handing in the ball as an offensive line, you're happy about that because it means you're doing your job. The running back's making you look good, and you start wearing down the defense. So better in his first 3 games, much better performance from the O-line as a whole. compared to last year. Last year was a bit of a debacle. I still think that, having those two American tackles all the time, just saying that's just the way it's done in the CFL, I still don't like that mentality. I still think you could find Canadian kids that can play out there, and potentially have 5 Canadian O-linemen across the board. Because if there's anything that Canada produces well in terms of players that can play at that next level, it's offensive linemen. Because there's not a huge, gap between, CFL and NFL when it comes to O-line play. So, yeah, it'd be nice to see 1 or 2 more Canadian O-linemen on there, but all in all, much better than last year.
Speaking of, you mentioned defense a little bit there. Switching over the defensive side of the ball here. We made a few really lucky plays last night. And I think a lot of people, they're planning parades now, and just because of how well this team, looks. And what are your thoughts on Roland Milligan actually, making a big statement in the CFL? What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought him up, because that's the one player I watched last night, and I think I'm going to jump ahead on this comment, guys, because I feel like there's a guy that we're going to see in green and white for 2 years. His contract will run out, and he'll end up free agent. If he keeps playing the way he's playing, he'll end up free agency and going out to Toronto or somewhere where the big, bright lights, big city, or maybe back to an NFL, or NFL Europe team. But impressed with his play. It was good to see, some of the new faces on defense play well last night. It was good to see Jackson Ford get in. I mean, albeit we don't want to see necessarily your second and third string safeties get in, but you know what? Things happen. So yeah, Milligan looks good. Still early, obviously, 3 games in. We certainly shouldn't be buying Grey Cup tickets yet. I think the West, now that we've seen that Winnipeg is not only beatable, but they have some holes. The West is going to be interesting. I think Saskatchewan's still going to end up middle of the pack. I still think Winnipeg will still be near the top. BC looks, considering they lost Nathan Rourke, BC looks pretty good, and not just last week, but in general. Calgary needs to fix their stuff and trying to figure out, and Edmonton's just a dumpster fire. They're not going to get much better. So that's how you're going to see it. I think at the bottom of the West, you're going to see Saskatchewan, Calgary, Edmonton, and then BC, Winnipeg, kind of fighting it out for the top. Sorry, I kind of went all the way around your question and out into league play, but yeah, there's a few good players on the Riders I'm watching this year, but I'm still reserving judgment on them. Still too early.
Tyson, any final questions for the president here?
Yeah, I got a quick one.
Talk about the alumni.
You mentioned Jackson Ford, and no, you're bang on, buddy. We do not want to see our second and third string players out there in any role, let alone safety. But if you could maybe comment on our safety position, just from what you've seen this year and going forward. So Jaden Dahlke appeared to be a rocket. He, we had our guy. He's out on the 6th game. Yep. Nelson Lacombo injured once again. First play of the game type deal. Where do we go from here? Do we move Revis back there? Somebody like that, an American? I mean, typically we would want a Canadian back there, correct?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's always been sort of those reserve spots for Canadians, slot back, the interior line, safety. Dahlke was good. Happy to see Lacombo get his chance, and then he goes down with an injury. And once again, I go back to your question earlier. It's like in this league, injuries are far more critical, it seems, than in the NFL, where they're 3 deep everywhere, right? The one thing I do like about Lacombo, but then also especially about Jackson Ford, is that Saskatchewan kids are well coached. They're very disciplined, and they will always just do their job. They don't try to be all-stars. They don't try to do any more than what they're asked to do. They just do their job. And I think, I don't know. I don't think Ford's going to start next week unless they're really desperate and they have to start him. And that's nothing against Jackson. It's just early. There is a possibility of moving Revis back there. You're probably going to see some DB juggling this week. I don't know how it's going to flush out, but I would be happy with Ford being there if it makes the front 7 stronger by not having to drop back a half or a linebacker. I think they're okay. I think they're going to be okay at the safety position once those guys come off the injury list. But yeah, the amount of tweaks and injuries that we've had the last couple of weeks is not starting the season out very well, but the team's finding a way to win, and that's what matters.
So you mentioned the Alumni Association there, and you know, obviously you're the president. Just tell us a little bit about what, you know, being the president of such a I guess esteemed association here in Saskatchewan. Tell us a little bit about what that's like.
Yeah, so I was invited back into the alumni way back in like 2014 by Brooks Finley, who was the president at the time. Since then, Terry Bullich, who was a fullback in the 70s, and then Rob Bresciani, who was also fullback in the 80s, were the next presidents. Rob was the president. Rob Bresciani was the president for the past 6 seasons and did a really good job, especially through COVID and so forth. But you know what? I felt I'd been with the group long enough, and I felt I understood what the mandate was for the alumni, and wanted to bring, you know, my business acumen of, you know, what I do for a day job and strategic planning into the Alumni Association, because I really think we can do a lot more. I think we can be a critical force in the community. So, you know, we have our 2 golf tournaments, one in Saskatoon that just happened last week, and then the Regina one July 17th. And then we have a couple of other critical events that we use for fundraising. And, you know, we're raising, you know, anywhere between $50,000 and $70,000 a year when all is said and done. And all that money goes back into amateur sport and to Football Saskatchewan and to amateur football, which is what our mandate is. We want to first and foremost try to promote and help amateur football in this province, and then amateur sport after that. It's all about the kids. It's all about having those grassroots programs. So that's what we're trying to do as an alumni association. We have a brand new Instagram page, Rough Riders Alumni. You can go check that out. We have our Twitter page, which Belton Johnson runs. And then the website's actually having a complete overhaul, and that's ridersalumni.com. We're really turning a corner here, and we're really trying to engage the 2000s players that have retired and moved on to adult life, and trying to get them on and boost that alumni membership over 100. Because it's critical. Like we need more people. We have a lot of events we're trying to get to, and we don't want the same 4 or 5 guys going to every event. So really, really honored to be the alumni president. I appreciate the guys having the faith in me. I think, you know, I came in like a bit of a bull in a china shop, but at the same time, I think they appreciate the structure I'm trying to create for them, and for the group, so that the community knows exactly what we're trying to do and how we're trying to do it. And so that's been good. And the Rough Rider Foundation with Cindy Fuchs, as well as the parent club, I met with Craig Reynolds last week. They're doing everything they can to support us so that we can support them back. And it's a great kinship amongst the 3 organizations between the parent club, the foundation, and ourselves. So happy to be in this position, plan on being here for a couple of years. We'll see what happens after that. But you know what, the more publicity and press we can get, you know, on shows like yours and others is all we ask for. And we just want people to know that we're out there.
Alrighty, well, yeah, I think that about does it for this podcast. Thank you so much, Quinn, for being our, technically, our first guest. We appreciate it so much. We hope to have you and a couple of the other guys back here at some point, you know. And yeah, so once again, where can they find you?
Yeah, so on Twitter we're at Rider Alumni. Twitter.com/Rider Alumni. And then on Instagram, we are Rough Riders Alumni. You just have to search that up. And then the website is just ridersalumni.com. I would suggest that the website is more for just general news and events, whereas the Twitter and the Instagram are more live in the moment in real time, especially the new Instagram. We have a great new freelancer that's helping us with that. So go check us out there. Help support us when we come out to your community. Come out and say hi.
Tyson, where can they find you?
You can check me out, on Facebook. It's just under my name, Tyson Craney, or Instagram. I am Hillbilly PhD. Get on there, give me a shout. Let's talk some ball. Just really want to thank you for coming on, Quinn. We truly appreciate it, and it means a lot to us.
And yeah, as always,
you guys. Thank you very much.
As always, you guys can find me at Caden Hardy everywhere on socials. Yeah, once again, thanks, Quinn. And yeah, we will see you guys in 2 weeks, because going into a bye week now. Thank you, guys.
There you go.